What's up, fam? Welcome back to another chilling chapter. Before we dive into today's twisted mystery, Father Brown and final clue found in Bible, hit me up. What made you smile today? And where in the world are you listening from? I'm featuring your stories in the next drop, so don't be shy. Now grab your tea, dim the lights, and get ready, because nothing in Whispers in the Fog is ever what it seems. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Deadly Silence of Kembleford. A thick mist clung to the ground like a shroud, enveloping Kembleford in an eerie embrace as the sun struggled to pierce the blanket of grey. The bell of St. Mary's Church tolled mournfully, its sound echoing in a hollow, empty world. In the lonely graveyard, the earth was damp, the grass slick with moisture, and the ancient tombstones stood like silent sentinels, bearing witness to the village's secrets. Father Brown ambled through the gravestones, his brown coat buttoned against the cold, his eyes keenly observing the details around him. It was here, among the whispering leaves and the sighing tombs, that he stumbled upon a sight that made his heart race. Splayed on the damp earth, at the foot of a twisted yew tree, was the body of Victor Larkin, the eccentric local historian. His spectacles were askew, and a thin trickle of blood stained the historical ledger he had clutched in his lifeless fingers. The old gentleman's face bore the pallor of death, but more disconcerting was the serene expression that seemed oddly out of place in such a gruesome context. As Father Brown knelt beside him, his mind raced. Victor had been a fixture of Kembleford, with a penchant for gathering tales of the village's dark past. Had he unearthed something too sinister to be revealed? The clergyman glanced at the ledger, opening it carefully to find disjointed notes, most concerning local legends, yet one page was covered in unfamiliar script. A curse upon the bearer of the golden locket, it read, inked hastily and tremulously. The heavy thud of boots interrupted his thoughts. It was Inspector Mallory, a stout man with a scruffy beard, who often disdained the clerical insight of Father Brown. He surveyed the scene, brow furrowed, his demeanor oscillating between suspicion and frustration. "You've found yet another body, Father," he grumbled, turning his gaze to the ledger. But Victor was just an old fool. Who might want him dead? Father Brown examined the way the blood had spread from Victor's head. "You would be surprised at how many secrets an old fool can hold, Inspector. To someone who wishes to keep the past buried, he might pose a grave threat." He gestured towards the open ledger, noticing the passage marked by concern. "This locket, where does it hold?" "A family heirloom," Mallory sighed, recalling the tales of the Larkin family. "Brought many misfortunes. Used to be said that whoever owned it was cursed." Father Brown lifted his gaze from the ledger, a pensive light glimmering in his brown eyes. Then, if Victor had uncovered it, he might have made enemies. At that moment, a figure emerged from the mist. It was Mrs. Elspeth Hargrove, a vivacious widow known for her gossip and an insatiable appetite for intrigue. "Father Brown, Inspector Mallory." She paused, out of breath, before her eyes landed on the body. "Oh, dear Lord. Victor, whatever happened?" "Can you provide a useful distraction, madam?" Mallory said brusquely. "Your talents for uttering secrets could well help us." "Secrets?" she gasped. "Oh, Kembleford is rife with them. Did you know about the Larkins' fall from grace? Old Victor's family is steeped in scandal. The locket was said to have vanished generations ago, but the whispers have only grown louder since it has resurfaced." "The whispers?" Father Brown queried, eyebrows raised. "What do you know of this locket?" I may have heard, Mrs. Hargrove replied playfully, that Victor's nephew, a rather ambitious lad, recently returned from London. Word says he plans to reclaim the family fortune, though it has come at the cost of igniting family disputes. Cynical old ghost, Mallory huffed. This is hardly credible. Is it not? Father Brown interjected smoothly, his face unreadable. There's much to be gleaned from family feuds and ambition. Elspeth, tell me more about Victor's nephew, Carl. As they spoke, the villagers began to gather, their expressions a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. Father Brown looked over them, catching sight of Carl Larkin's impassive face lurking at the edge of the crowd. There was something simmering beneath that calm facade. The boy's hands twitched slightly at his side, the faintest glimmer of cold fury dancing in his eyes. Victor had made enemies, yet one seemed unshakable in his calmness, a stark contrast to the chaos around him. Father Brown's instincts flared as he noted how Carl stared blankly at the corpse, as if dissecting the weight of his next move. The sharp lines of his jaw clenched, gradually. "Off you go now. Nothing more to see here," Mallory shouted at the villagers, shooing them away like an agitated crow. But Father Brown remained, caught between instinct and reason. As dusk descended, cloaking the village in twilight, Father Brown turned to Carl, who seemed disturbed, yet in control. "You arrived home just as your uncle was killed," he stated, voice steady yet probing. "Tell me, how do you feel about the past you inherited?" Carl met Father Brown's gaze. "I feel it's time to reclaim what's mine." Victor stood in the way of that. The hint of menace hovered in the air, thickening with implications. Father Brown's brow furrowed as he processed the exchange, seeking connections amidst the intrigue. Suddenly, he noticed the outline of a string around Carl's neck, the glint of something golden tucked beneath his shirt. "Is that the locket?" Father Brown probed, his voice calm yet insistent. The young man stepped back, a wide grin emerging as he offered nothing further. But just then, a rustle from the nearby shrubbery interrupted, causing all heads to turn. A creature scuttled out, the old ram from the nearby farm, dragging along something within its mouth, something that glimmered faintly in the twilight. The creature dropped the item at Father Brown's feet. Bending down, the priest's heart raced. It was the golden locket, unmistakably ornate, akin to the one referenced in Victor's notes. As he grasped it, a chilling realization coursed through him. This was not merely about fortune or secrets. This was deeply personal. The storm clouds of danger loomed closer. With tensions mounting, Father Brown held the locket aloft, its golden surface glimmering ominously in the dim light. "A curse indeed," he whispered under his breath, but uncertain if he spoke of the locket or the motives that lay behind Victor's abrupt demise. As the villagers murmured among themselves, Father Brown felt a sudden, profound sense of foreboding. "Tomorrow we uncover the truth," he declared firmly. Yet, in that moment of confidence, the question lingered heavy in the air. Who among them was truly capable of murder? And more importantly, who would be next? Chapter 2. A letter arrives too late. The village of Kembleford lay draped in a thick mist, the kind that swirled among the gravestones of the churchyard, whispering secrets of the past to those who dared listen. It was in this muted atmosphere that Father Brown found himself walking among the graves, his instincts prickling with a sense of foreboding. The tranquility of the morning was soon to be shattered, for he could sense that truth was lurking just beneath the surface, waiting like a predator in the stillness. He paused by a large weathered stone, pausing to read the engraving. Here lies Eliza Tremlett, beloved daughter and sister. The tremors of kindness and loss surged through him at the name. Only yesterday, the village had been abuzz with her tragic passing. A mere accident, or so it had been regarded. Father Brown had a feeling that there were more secrets to be unearthed than the villagers suspected. As he pondered, a familiar voice approached, the wooden creak of an old gate, heralding the arrival of Mrs. Hargrove, the local postmistress. Her face was pale, and she clutched a letter in her gloved hand, the sight of it sending a fresh wave of tension through the priest's heart. "Father Brown." Her voice trembled as she drew near, the letter shaking between her fingers. "I believe this letter is addressed to Miss Tremlett." Father Brown took the envelope, examining the elegant script that formed the name Eliza Tremlett. It bore a London postmark and, glancing at the date, revealed it had been sent 3 days prior, the day of Eliza's death. "Do you think it is important?" Mrs. Hargrove asked, her brow furrowed with worry. "Let us find out," he replied thoughtfully, carefully tearing the letter open. The chill of the morning air prickled on the back of his neck as he read the contents. A heartfelt apology from one Jonathan Blake, a man with a checkered past and, intriguingly, a previous acquaintance of Eliza's. His words conveyed a deep regret about a recent disagreement between them, revealing a fragile relationship, one mired in complexity. "Did you know Mr. Blake?" Father Brown queried, looking at Mrs. Hargrove, whose face had turned a shade paler. "I knew him well enough," she said, her voice tightening. "A charming rogue, but no good can come from his presence in Kembleford. Everyone knows that." Father Brown nodded slowly, almost absently. The apology seemed sincere, but incomplete. A wave of possibility washed over him, and he knew, like a tightly wound clock, that if released just right, it would reveal its mysteries. "Why now, I wonder," he murmured, more to himself than her. "Why send this letter at the hour of her demise? It's as though he knew something." Suddenly, like rippling water disturbed by a wandering fish, a flicker of tension pulsed through Mrs. Hargrove. Perhaps she had more to say, or he to her, she whispered, eyes darting nervously toward the misty church doors. "It cannot be a coincidence, Father." Before Father Brown could respond, they were startled by the sound of hurried footsteps approaching. The figure of Inspector Mallory burst through the fog, his brow furrowed and manner weighted with urgency. "Father Brown," he called out, skidding to a halt before them. "Have you seen Jonathan Blake? He was last seen wandering toward the church this morning, quite agitated." The priest felt a tightness in his chest. "No, but I have a letter addressed to Miss Tremlett from Mr. Blake." He handed it over, watching as the inspector's eyes narrowed on its contents. "I had a feeling he was involved," Mallory muttered, folding the letter with stiff precision. "He's shown face around here more than once since her passing. You don't reckon he—" His voice trailed off, hinting at a darker consideration. The trio fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts, unraveling the tangled web. "Father," Mallory resumed, casting his gaze back to the enveloping mist. "If Blake had grudges with her, or worse, it's possible he may bear a deeper role in her death. Injustice does lie on the tongue of anger," Father Brown observed softly. "But is it anger that kills, or fear?" Just then, a jagged bolt of thunder slashed through the cobwebbed sky, startling them all. The air grew heavier, charged with the ominous weight of revelation. "I'll talk to Mr. Blake," Mallory declared, quickening his pace as he headed back toward his office. If he's still around, he hesitated, struggling to articulate the haunted thought. If he's unwittingly responsible, it must be uncovered before the day passes. Father Brown turned back to Mrs. Hargrove, an intuition tugging at him. There is more to this letter we haven't discovered yet. Acquaintanceship does not always yield truth. Yes, Father, she said, her hands trembling. Do you think he might confess? It's not confession I seek, but understanding. He looked at the church, its steeples swaying gently against the stormy sky. Let's pay a visit to Eliza's family home. The answers may be cloaked in shadows, but truth thrives in light. As they hastily moved towards the old Tremlett manor, a startled cry broke the air. Father Brown looked sharply at Mrs. Hargrove, who had stumbled back against a tombstone. Father, look, she gasped, pointing at the shrubbery by the gate. Among the tangled weeds lay a peculiar object, glinting silver against the earth. Father Brown moved closer, heart racing as he reached down and unearthed it. It was a delicate brooch, the very one Eliza had worn during the last village gathering. Clutching the brooch, realization surged through him. The web was tightening, and just as the mist began to lift, fresh darkness loomed. Quickly, Mrs. Hargrove, he commanded. Lady Tremlett needs to know what we've discovered. We might be running out of time. They dashed toward the manor, the cloaked figures of doubt and deceit at their heels. The sun broke through the clouds to reveal a silvery glimmer. Just as Father Brown felt the corners of the encroaching danger leave shadows stuck in the hearts of the villagers of Kembleford. Puzzles remained as swirling as the mist, and clarity felt just out of reach. But not for long, for time, a fickle ally, now pressed against a boundless uncertainty, leaving Father Brown to ponder. Would this letter, arriving too late, finally unveil the truth, or would it be just another murky path leading to despair? Chapter 3. The Haunting Alibi. The clock struck the hour as a mysterious mist curled its fingers around the gravestones of the old churchyard of St. Mary's. A disquieting chill settled upon Kembleford, and Father Brown drew his coat tighter around himself as he made his way through the headstones. It was here, amidst the whispers of the departed, that the village's unease had taken on a life of its own, just 3 days before the grand ball at Windswept Manor. The event now overshadowed by the shocking death of Reginald Abernathy. Abernathy, with his sharp financial acumen and high society charm, had been found lifeless in his study, but the circumstances of his demise were far more perplexing than mere heart failure or a sudden stroke. No, the rumors spoke of poison, and to make matters worse, his beloved cousin Justine had been discovered asleep near his body with a half-empty bottle of claret in her hand, and no memory of how she got there. The whispers claimed that the girl was both guilty and a victim, and Father Brown, full of doubt and compassion, sought the truth. As he reached the marble archway of the church, a figure materialized through the fog, a tall, gaunt man with deep-set eyes that flickered with remorse. It was Arthur Moresby, the local solicitor and personal advisor to Abernathy. Father, I fear we— Arthur's words caught in his throat as he drew near, his pallor made worse by the chilling fog. I cannot shake the feeling that something sinister is afoot. Tell me what you can, Father Brown urged gently, his tone pressed yet soothing. He noted the tremor in Arthur's hands as he spoke, clutching his leather case like a lifeline. I arrived at the manor just after the police had cordoned off the room. The constable's evidence seemed solid, just that bottle of claret. which was later discovered to be tainted. Yet there's something else, something I overheard from Justine just before the chaos unfolded. She mentioned the spirit of her late mother, how it would guide her during storms. Guidance from the dead in this case turned fatal, Father Brown muttered, frowning. But Arthur, if this was truly an act of malignancy, we must consider who benefits from Reginald's death. He stepped closer, his voice low. And we must examine every word spoken in the manor that night. Arthur turned pale at the insinuation, running a hand through his thinning hair. You don't think— No, no, Father Brown smiled gently but firmly. But let us not forget that alibis can be haunting, Mr. Moresby. Perhaps all participants at the ball had motives cloaked beneath fine silk and polished shoes. The conversation halted when they both heard the distant sound of someone calling from the manor grounds. They exchanged glances and began their slow march back towards the windswept manor. Upon arriving, Father Brown was struck by the undeniable beauty of the manor, with its ivy-clad walls and Gothic arches defying the growing tension within. It was as if the house itself held its breath, anticipating the coming storm. As they entered, the murmur of conversation and clinking of glasses danced through the air, a sharp contrast to their grim business. Reginald's death had put the gala on shaky ground. Nevertheless, the people of Kembleford seemed determined to honor the semblance of normality. Justine is upstairs, Arthur whispered, pointing to the staircase. She wishes to speak to you. Father Brown climbed the ornate staircase, the floorboards creaking beneath his confident footsteps. He paused at the half-open door of Justine's room, faint light spilling into the corridor. Before he could knock, her muffled cry caught his attention. He entered to find her sitting on a lavish chaise longue, her face pale and weary, betraying her night of lost memories. Father Brown, she breathed, her voice thick with fatigue, you must believe me. I loved him, yet I cannot remember anything. Justine, Father Brown began carefully, assessing her emotional state. Take a breath. Whatever you remember might hold the key to understanding or absolving you. Justine nodded, but her gaze strayed to a small table where a framed photograph of her mother stood, adorned with a funeral wreath. Mamma would always say, the dead linger in the hearts of the living, guiding us, as if she were watching over me that night. She shuddered. But Reginald's heart is now still. An eerie talisman, Father Brown murmured, trying to decipher her burgeoning revelations. If you want to be free of suspicion, tell me everything you do remember. It's all a blur. The laughter, the music. Reginald's eyes were clouded, distressed after he drank. Justine stared into the distance, and suddenly she gasped. The shattered glass. I recall knowing he'd received a threatening letter on the very night he died. What letter? What did it say? No, I don't know, she cried, wringing her hands, but I'm sure it arrived at the ball. Father Brown's mind raced. A threat on Reginald's life, camouflaged amid the celebration, hidden like a spectre waiting for its moment. Justine, do you mind? He said, as he heartily clicked open the ornate box on the table beside her, a habit of his when invested in his subjects. I would like to see your handwriting, to match it against any letters we find. Justine's eyes widened, and her hand flew to her mouth, her expression darkening. I can't, Father. There's something I ought to tell you, but I'm afraid I can't remember everything clearly. Just then, an agonizing scream disrupted the air, pulses racing through the house. Father Brown rushed from the room, following the sound to the lavish ballroom where the guests were now a tableau of shock and dread. There, amidst the crowd, stood a man, his fingers stained red, grasping a uniquely intricate glass letter opener, one covered with a pattern identical to the ones used in Reginald's study. "Reginald didn't die alone," the stranger bellowed, breathless with revelation. "He was murdered." And as those words hung heavily in the air, Father Brown's mind whirled with the horrors of a night not yet unraveled, a thread listless, yet yearning to be pulled. The daunting questions loomed above him, but one remained firm. The alibi composed of phantoms danced dangerously within reach. Who had penned the letters that sought Reginald's demise? As the shadows deepened, Father Brown felt the winds of fate shifting ominously, beckoning a new truth to reveal itself. His resolve tightened. They were now closer to the heart of darkness. Chapter 4 awaited, promising yet more danger and unearthing secrets long buried beneath the gold and grandeur of windswept manor. Chapter 4, The Vanishing Suspect. The fog hung low over Kembleford, wrapping the quaint village in a shroud of mystery as Father Brown made his way toward the churchyard. He tightened his overcoat against the chill, the damp air thick with an unshakable tension that seemed to electrify the cobblestone streets. The death of Lady Cecilia Albright had drained the village of its usual cheer, leaving behind a palpable fear that festered among the residents. As the church bell tolled the hour, its sombre chimes echoed through the mist, an omen more than a mere marker of time. Suddenly, a figure stumbled out from behind the ancient oak tree. It was Edward Talbot, the estate manager, his face ashen, eyes wide with terror. He gasped for breath, his words tumbling out in a frantic whisper. "Father Brown, it's Emily. She's missing, vanished into thin air. I went to her cottage to speak with her, and the place was empty, not a soul in sight." Father Brown's heart quickened, not only for the gravity of the news, but for the implications it carried. Emily, a maid on Lady Cecilia's estate, had been one of the last people seen with her. Rumors of a budding romance between her and the late lady's nephew Bernard had spread through the village like wildfire. "Edward, did you look inside? Might she be hiding from someone?" "No, Father. The door was ajar. I was afraid. I thought I heard something." He trembled as he spoke, the memory clearly rattling him. "But when I entered, there was no sign of a struggle, only her belongings left scattered." "Keep calm," Father Brown instructed, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "We must gather more information. There's no telling how this connects to Lady Cecilia's death. If someone sought to harm her, they may be after Emily as well." They hurried to the quaint, flower-laden path that led to Emily's cottage. The eerie silence was interrupted only by the rustling of dried leaves underfoot. Upon arrival, Father Brown noted the strangely rich scent of lavender lingering in the air, a stark contrast to the dark mood that surrounded them. He stepped inside the small abode, scanning the interior with keen eyes. The fireplace was cold and dark, yet something caught his attention. On the mantel, a half-burned letter lay waiting like an unanswered question. He gently picked it up, the paper worn and yellowed. The scrawl was shaky but distinct. "Dearest Emily, I cannot bear the wrath of Aunt Cecilia any longer. Tonight I will end it all." The letter abruptly trailed off, its conclusion unreadable. "Who is it from?" Edward leaned over his shoulder, his curiosity barely masking his anxiety. "I cannot be certain, yet the script reflects certain anguish, perhaps linked to lost love," Father Brown mused. "But one thing is clear. Emily is not the simple maid she appeared to be. In that moment, the sound of a low moan echoed from outside, sending a jolt through them both. Father Brown dashed to the door, and Edward followed, his face as pale as the mist swirling around them. As they stepped outside, they were met by the sight of a figure tangled in the brambles at the edge of the garden. None other than Bernard Albright, his clothing torn and misaligned, a streak of mud across his forehead. "Bernard," Edward gasped, "what happened to you?" Bernard's eyes were wide with dread, and he struggled to rise from his precarious position. "I was coming to the cottage to warn Emily. I thought she could be dead," Father Brown interrupted sharply, frustration flickering within him. "What exactly do you know, Bernard?" "It's not what I know," he stammered, panic rising in his voice. "It's what I suspect. If Lady Cecilia discovered our plans, she would have stopped us. She threatened to throw me out of the estate and ruin my life." The admission hung like a taut wire in the air. Father Brown studied him intently. And now, Bernard glanced around, his eyes darting, as if the shadows hidden within the trees might come alive. "I don't know. I was running when I saw someone who panicked when they saw me, and then I fell." "Who?" Father Brown pressed, drawing near. This newfound urgency pointed to a deeper, sinister plot. "I don't know," Bernard exclaimed, backing away instinctively. "Just a flash in the dark. A face I recognized, but—" Edward interjected. "But whom?" Before Bernard could respond, a shouted voice echoed sharply through the mist. "Stop, you two!" They turned to see Constable Hargrove, striding toward them, his lantern swaying ominously in the enveloping darkness. "I heard the commotion. What's happened here?" With the nearing constable, Father Brown felt the urgency of the situation intensify. The missing maid, the letter, and now Bernard's breathless confession, all the threads of mystery were weaving themselves tighter. Just as he was about to deliver what could be a revealing comment, a rustle in the bushes caught their attention, and they all turned as a shadowy figure darted away, a shape familiar, yet obscured by the fog. "After them!" Father Brown shouted. "They might lead us right to Emily." They dashed after the figure, hearts pounding, as the scene transformed into a blurred rush of motion and breath. As the challenge melted into the surrounding fog, Father Brown felt a chill deep within him. A hug of dread settled around his heart. This was starting to unravel into a story far more convoluted than he had ever imagined. Just as they were about to round a bend in the narrow passage, the figure disappeared, leaving only a trail of whispering leaves. Father Brown halted suddenly, staring into the murky unknown. With a feeling as old as time, he sensed they were no longer chasing the truth, but rather being led into the darkness. His pulse quickened as scenes played in his mind, turning comments and hidden sentiments, all spiraling into an inexorable conclusion that was tantalizingly close, yet maddeningly out of reach. The true nature of betrayal, the intertwining lives, and their desires were about to clash, and he intuited that he was on the cusp of a pivotal revelation. But now, more questions hung in the air than answers, and as the fog swirled ever thicker, he mentally brimmed over with the certainty he was destined to find Emily, or something darker, still looming in the shadowy depths of Kembleford. Chapter 5. A Will Never Meant to Be. The dawn light filtered through the ancient elms that shaded Kembleford's village square, illuminating the morning fog that clung to the cobblestones like a shroud. Father Brown turned the corner of the manor house, the trajectory of his meandering thoughts disrupted by the sharp clap of a door being thrown open. Old Mrs. Wheaton, the local gossip and ever-watchful eye of the village, stood in her nightgown, the breeze tussling her locks, a look of outrage twisted across her wrinkled face. "It's horrible, Father. Horrible," she exclaimed, clutching her shawl to her chest. "George Pritchard has been found dead. Dead in his study." "Dead?" Father Brown said, his brow knitting with concern. "How?" "Horribly," Mrs. Wheaton quibbled, voice cracking as she rushed to fill him in. "The doctor says a heart attack, or so they think, but the way he was sprawled across his desk, just like that. And did I hear you mention a will?" As Father Brown trod softly toward the Pritchard estate, the imposing structure loomed ahead like a spectral presence. The village, so accustomed to the peace of Sunday matins, was vibrant and uneasy with whispers. Something sinister was afoot, the air thick with speculation. Approaching the front door, he met Miss Clara Pritchard, George's only daughter. Her face was pale, framed by dark curls that trembled with each breath. She stood clutching a lace handkerchief, her distress palpable. "Father Brown," she greeted, her voice barely rising above a whisper. "You must help us. It can't be true. Father's will. It's gone." A will that was never meant to be, he pondered aloud, stepping into the dimly lit entrance hall where shadows intertwined like conspirators. "What do you mean, my dear?" Clara's eyes flashed with a mix of indignation and fear. He said he would write a new will. He kept changing his mind all week about how he wanted everything divided. He was drafting it in the hours before. Her words stumbled, and the atmosphere crackled with unsaid thoughts. Father Brown motioned for her to guide him to the study, focusing on the resolve evident in her manner. Entering the study, the thick scent of old leather and seemingly stale tea filled the air. George Pritchard lay, as she had said, slumped over an oak desk, cluttered with papers that hinted at his zeal for business at the expense of familial ties. Father Brown carefully maneuvered around the room, his mind piecing together the jagged edges of a deeply troubled family. "What was your father's intent regarding the inheritance?" he asked, observing a set of receipts for land purchases scattered haphazardly across the floor. "I presume he thought of leaving the estate and business to me," Clara replied, her voice quaking but steady in its resolve. "But he had become distant and difficult these past months. He often mentioned his regret. He didn't mean to shut me out." Father Brown nodded, noting the emotional undercurrents between father and daughter. "Who else besides you stood to inherit?" Clara hesitated, glancing nervously towards a family portrait hanging on the wall. "There's Uncle Edwin. Father always said he would never allow him to be a part of our affairs, a decision rooted in past grievances. Maybe the old feuds have flickered to life once more." Before he could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Mallory, his steps echoing across the polished floorboards. "Father Brown," he began, tipping his hat respectfully. "The doctor confirmed the heart attack, but there are some things that don't add up. The parchment we found in his hand, it was an unsigned draft of a will." Father Brown perked up at this revelation. "A draft, you say? There must be something vital in it, something that could indicate the intentions he left unvoiced." The inspector looked bemused, and Clara chimed in. "If someone found it important enough to take the original, they must have had something to gain." Father Brown sauntered back to the desk, peering where papers lay strewn carelessly. Amid the clutter, his sharper eye caught sight of a specific item tucked beneath a pile, a tiny, ornate brass key. "Clara, Can you think where this key might lead? I'm not sure. Perhaps it's... Oh. Her expression changed as realization dawned. It could be the old cellar. It's been locked for years. Father refused to speak of it. Then we must see it at once, Father Brown insisted, already moving toward the door. A missing will may reveal more than intention. It may uncover motive. However, just as they descended the steps into the gloom, the ominous clang of a distant bell filled the air, the rushing sound of wind and whispers ushering in doubt and dread. Something was indeed stirring. The villagers were gathering at the manor, and soon the tension would envelop them all. In the cellar's darkness, where cobwebs whispered of secrets long forgotten, Father Brown's heart raced not out of fear, but intrigue. With the key turning in the rusty lock, the plot thickened. What lay hidden in the shadows of Pritchard's past? Clara's distant fears echoed in the stale air before him. A revelation awaited, thick with the promise of layers yet to uncover. As the door creaked open, a hooded figure dashed from the far corner, vanishing back into the labyrinthine corridors of the manor. "Stop!" Father Brown shouted, adrenaline seeping into his veins, but it was too late. The figure disappeared, and with it, perhaps the very answer they sought, enveloping the manor in a shroud of uncertainty. And some deeper truth, beyond the echoes of a will, never meant to be whispered ominously in the corners of holy intrigue. How far would they go to protect their secrets? How much was at stake? Father Brown would find out, but now the very next step was uncertain, and time was pressing. Chapter 6. The Inheritance of Lies. The air in the village of Kembleford was thick with fog as Father Brown made his way with determined steps towards the Oldfield Manor. Rarely did the clouds settle so low, shrouding the grand estate in an eerie embrace. Whispers echoed through the village. The death of Lady Beatrice Oldfield had left a trail of uncertainty. Now, as Father Brown approached the manor, he felt the weight of expectations. Rumors had been circulating about Lady Beatrice's will, the source of much resentment and perhaps murder. Earlier that day, the townsfolk had gathered in whispers around the parish, concocting tales of jealousy and greed amongst Lady Beatrice's heirs. Her son, Charles Oldfield, a man whose arrogance rivaled only his unfortunate penchant for gambling, stood to gain the largest share. The daughter Eleanor had always lived in her mother's shadow. With each step past the ornate iron gates of Oldfield Manor, Father Brown sensed the illusions tethering the family to a truth they feared to confront. His footsteps echoed on the elegant wood floor of the grand hallway, resonating in the silence that felt like a collective held breath. Shadows danced along the walls, adorned with treatments of old hunting scenes, their eyes seeming to watch him in curious anticipation. "I did not expect you so soon, Father," came the voice of Eleanor, her visage pale against the dull backdrop of the manor's creaky interior. The woman stood framed in the doorway, her face a mix of penitence and determination. "You have come to uncover my mother's secrets, I presume. They are only veiled in a tapestry of lies." "Secrets may be just the whispers one wishes to keep, my dear," Father Brown replied gently, peering into her anxious demeanor. "But they often have a way of unraveling themselves." A flicker of distress crossed her face. It was he who executed the most vile of betrayals. Out of greed, he would steal what was ours. Her voice rose with conviction as she continued, "Charles means to claim everything, to bury the truth along with Mother." Father Brown tilted his head, absorbing her turmoil. A mind shaped by bitterness often concealed layers of truth. And how is that, Eleanor? Wasn't it your brother who discovered Lady Beatrice's lifeless body? The wolf feigns affection for the flock, she spat, clenching her fists at her sides as if to suppress trembling anger. He has nothing but duplicity in his heart. He was in the thick of it too. As they spoke, a cloud of foreboding settled. The manor had played witness to much heartache and scheming. I believe there are deeper currents at work, much like the river beneath the still surface, Father Brown continued, scanning the ambient surroundings, searching for signs of the truth, the threads of deceit that bound the family. It was not just the gambling debts that burdened him, Father. He was furious that Mother planned to alter her will. I overheard him arguing with her just days before her death. Eleanor's voice, once sharp, softened to that of a confessor with a secret, a fire dimmed by shadows. Alter her will. Change is no easy endeavor for a woman set in her ways, Father Brown mused, measuring each word carefully. What would she have changed, I wonder? Suddenly, a creak from the second floor shattered the tension. Eleanor paled, glancing upwards as a figure entered the hall. Charles, his face filled with a mixture of fatigue and menace, stepped into the dim light. "Ah, the priest," Charles started, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Come to settle family affairs, have you? Eleanor speaks too much, but fear not. This manor is riddled with secrets, as you say." "Secrets can easily turn into lies, Charles," Father Brown observed, his gaze piercing through the bluster. "Your mother's will is the essence of those lies, is it not?" Charles scowled, his eyes flickering with defiance. "My mother felt free to change her mind. We all have choices, don't we? And the truth? Sometimes it's buried, like her body in the ground behind the chapel." The comment languished in the air, laden with implication. Father Brown could feel Eleanor stiffening beside him, her breath hitching at her brother's brutal revelation. "You were present when she passed?" he inquired carefully. "Why ask about a thing already lost?" "I simply found her. Isn't it time for you to let sleeping dogs lie?" Charles dismissed coldly, brushing past them and disappearing down the shadowy corridor. "Can you feel it?" Eleanor whispered, a hint of fear threading through her tone. "The thunder? The injustice brewing just beneath the surface. No one can be trusted when money is in play. You must be careful." It was then that Father Brown noticed a glimmer amidst the knickknacks on the mantel, a small silver frame turned slightly askew. He stepped closer, examining its contents, a handwritten letter, partially obscured yet clearly addressed to Lady Beatrice. "Let me see," Eleanor urged, trying to catch a glimpse, before Father Brown slipped the letter from its frame with careful precision. The handwriting was familiar, a character intertwined in their family tale, but the surface seemed smooth and unassuming. "Your brother's hand," he whispered as he scrutinized the ink, but the words, veiled in a child's grace, were hardly decipherable. A heavy silence enveloped them, pregnant with tentative revelations, leaving them on the brink of discovery. The letter felt significant, though its message remained hidden, like a specter in the fog. "Father, what does it mean?" Eleanor asked, eyes widening into a stare fraught with desperation. "I sense," Father Brown mused, "that the inheritance your mother spoke of was one not merely tied to wealth, but something more insidious. Lies beget lies, and amidst this a fortune may emerge, both foul and esteemed." Suddenly, the clock on the wall chimed, echoing ominously through the hall, fracturing their unyielding tension. With a sweeping glance, Father Brown met Eleanor's shocked expression. Time would soon tell if they unmasked the treachery entwined in velvet shadows. To his ears, the echoes of concealed truths fell heavy. As the ticking continued, soon mingled with the distant hallow of church bells, he realized that the future held the promise of revelations, if only they could navigate the web of entanglements surrounding Lady Beatrice's legacy. And yet, as the night enveloped Oldfield Manor, Father Brown harbored an unsettling certainty. Somewhere in those secrets lay the consequence of their spiritual inheritance. Chapter 7. The Confession Beyond the Grave. The cold light of dawn broke over Kembleford, weaving sombre shadows through the mist-laden trees surrounding St. Martin's Church. Inside, amid the flickering candlelight, Father Brown stood before the altar, his heart heavy with sorrow. He'd just encountered the cryptic notes left by the late Mrs. Adeline Hargrove, a woman whose life had been as intricately tangled as the ivy creeping up the ancient stone walls of her manor. Her untimely death was supposed to be a tragic accident, but Father Brown had sensed a deeper current of deceit flowing through the village. As he turned away from the altar, a shudder of apprehension rippled through him. The chilling air was thick with foreboding, and he couldn't shake the feeling that secrets were waiting to be unearthed. Determined, he made for the old churchyard where he'd last seen Mrs. Hargrove's son, Charles. The young man had been inconsolable, and Father Brown feared the despair gripping him went beyond his mother's passing. As he stepped onto the damp grass of the graveyard, the mournful caw of a raven pierced the dreary silence, drawing his attention to a fresh grave. It was not marked with a stone, nor did it have flowers laid upon it, an unceremonious resting place hastily excavated. Kneeling beside the grave, Father Brown's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the name etched on the wooden marker, Avery Collins. A shiver ran down his spine. Avery had been its former caretaker, a kind man who had vanished on the same night of Mrs. Hargrove's death. The villagers had whispered of foul play, but no evidence had surfaced to support their conjectures. Now, to find his name so prominently displayed on a grave coupled with the grim void surrounding it ignited a spark of urgency within Father Brown. The soft rustling of leaves alerted him to another presence. It was Charles Hargrove, his face pale and eyes bright with an almost haunted intensity. "Father, you shouldn't be here," he warned, gaze darting toward the unmarked grave. The wild disorder of his hair and the paleness of his complexion spoke of sleepless nights and burdens too heavy for one soul. "This place holds too many questions, my son," Father Brown responded softly, his tone urging. "Tell me what you see when you look at that grave." Charles paused, his fingers trembling as they brushed the edges of the wooden marker. "Avery was—" his voice faltered. "He was too close to my mother's secrets. I feared what he might reveal. Secrets can be deadly, yet they often linger to torment us." Father Brown studied Charles, a sense of foreboding growing. The young man's expression flickered with something akin to guilt, but what lay buried beneath it was the true enigma. "Did your mother confide in him?" "Not just him," Charles blurted out, voice clawing toward desperation. "Avery had something on her, a ledger, or so I believe. When she fell, I saw him lurking in the shadows. Thought—" His voice trailed off, regret heavy in each breath. "The ledger. This could be a valuable piece of evidence." Father Brown pondered aloud, his mind racing. But is it perhaps a coincidence that he would end up here? "No, I saw him on the night she died, disputing over something," Charles whispered, the rawness in his voice spilling over into tears. I didn't want it to end that way. Fear twisted deep within Father Brown. The boy's grief harbored an undercurrent of something darker, a hidden motive perhaps, and it was only growing thicker. But before he could press further, a heavy footfall echoed on gravel, accompanied by a flash of auburn fabric moving through the mist. It was Lady Genevieve, the village's new aristocrat, and a woman known for her sharp intuition as much as her sharp tongue. "Father," she said breathlessly, sweeping up to them, brushing her damp curls away from her face. "I could hear the movement in the church. What has brought you out here?" "Lady Genevieve," Father Brown replied, eyeing her warily, "you might want to reconsider your approach to the graveyard. You're not the only one with secrets, it seems." She mused playfully, though her eyes glimmered with intrigue. Secrets can be burdensome, but sometimes a convoluted lie brings more peace than an unwrapped truth. Father Brown knew she thrived on misdirection. "What do you mean, my lady?" But before she could answer, she gasped. "My word, is that poor Avery Collins? I had presumed he'd fled, as he was fond of tales of adventure. Yet how strange that he, too, bears secrets." Charles's face blanched. "Do you know something we don't, Lady Genevieve?" Her gaze was inscrutable, a dangerous weapon wielded with elegance. "Perhaps the answer lies in the past. Avery and your mother were embroiled in a dispute over the estate. You should reconsider your affection for this grave. There are far darker shadows lingering within those who dwell still in this village." Father Brown remained silent, each moment heavy with tension, as he studied the shifting expressions on their faces. The declaration that had been left hanging drew tight, the strands of fate woven dangerously close together. Then, without warning, a shuddering breeze swept through the graveyard, rustling the now damp leaves and sending a chill through Father Brown's spine. In that moment, a loose parchment slipped from the folds of Lady Genevieve's dress, fluttering down in the wind, landing among the grass at their feet. "Your letter?" Father Brown noticed the unusual scrawl on the overturned paper, and a glimpse of its sinister contents gripped him with icy fingers. As he bent over to retrieve it, a sense of urgency quickened within him. The ink had dried, but whispered of intentions not yet hidden from the world. With a surprising tremor, he turned it over. "What's wrong?" Charles asked, inching closer, dread coloring his tones. Father Brown could barely contain the truth coiling around his heart. "It seems your mother had an admirer," he murmured, his voice laced with astonished disbelief. "An admirer who promised to reveal all, whether you liked it or not." Then, above the grave, a deep rumble rolled over the skies of Kembleford, threatening rain. Father Brown felt it, the calculating providence of secrets threatening to spill as shadows flickered around them. The next chapter of truth demanded a resolution, and as darkness blotted the sun, they stood at the brink of something far more insidious than they could ever imagine. The confession was beyond the grave, and none were ready to face its consequences. Chapter 8. The Hidden Room Revealed. The cold fingers of fog curled around the dilapidated manor of Hartwell House, shrouding it in an eerie silence. Inside, the ancient wood creaked beneath the weight of an unseen tension as Father Brown stepped carefully down the dim corridor, a lantern flickering in his hand. Just days ago, the murder of Lord Abernathy sent shockwaves through the small village of Kembleford, and now, as revelations about hidden motives and unearthing family secrets unfurled, Father Brown felt the chill of something unspeakable lurking beneath the manor's decaying facade. Suddenly, a muffled cry pierced the stillness, sending a jolt through his senses. He hurried toward the sound, pressed against the peeling wall. A door at the end of the corridor had slightly ajar, light spilling forth like a beckoning invitation. He clicked off the lantern as he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was a time capsule. Dust motes danced in the beam of sun streaming through a half-shuttered window, illuminating the outlines of rotting furniture. However, it wasn't the room's age that caught his attention. It was the outline of a hidden door on the far wall, only discernible through a distortion in the wallpaper. Before he could examine it, a figure darted across the room. Margaret Abernathy, Lord Abernathy's daughter, her eyes wide and shadowed with distress. "Father Brown," she gasped, her elegant fingers trembling as she pointed towards the bulging wallpaper. "You've come? I didn't know." Her voice trailed off, and for a moment they were both ensnared by the looming possibility of what lay behind the hidden door. "Margaret," Father Brown urged gently, moving toward her. "What do you know about this?" Her expression shifted, oscillating between resolve and fear. It was always whispered about, a hidden room where my father kept documents, possibly secrets." She bit her lip, her voice barely above a whisper. "But he promised to destroy them, for our family's sake." "Secrets hidden even from you, his own daughter," Father Brown remarked. "Either Lord Abernathy was a cautious man or a deeply secretive one. Did anyone else know?" She glanced around, her voice quivering with urgency. "Only Edward, my brother. He always had ambitions, fueled by jealousy. Father often scolded him for his reckless nature." Father Brown nodded in understanding, piecing the family dynamics together as he studied the wallpaper's edges more closely. "Edward claimed that this house held his birthright. If there's anything incriminating here, it's not just your father's past we're unearthing, but perhaps something that involves Edward's motives." Margaret paled, a dawning horror spreading across her face. "You think Edward murdered him, don't you? Because of what he could inherit?" "Jealousy is indeed a powerful motive," Father Brown replied, glancing again at the obscure door. "But first, we must discover what Lord Abernathy sought. To conceal, with a swift motion, he pressed against the wall, and to his astonishment, it swung inward, revealing a small, dimly lit room. The air inside was stale, thick with the must of forgotten years. As he stepped over the threshold, the flickering light from the room beyond cast shadows across a dust-covered desk. Papers were scattered across it like fallen leaves. Some were burnt at the edges, while others were intact. The lantern's glow illuminated a scrawled signature at the bottom of one sheet: Edward Abernathy. Father Brown picked it up, examining the letters. "Margaret, come in and look at this." She hesitated for just a moment before stepping inside the oppressive silence of the hidden space. Her breath caught in her throat as she scanned the papers. "These are correspondences, but with whom? I don't recognize the names." As Father Brown shuffled through the letters, he noted references to a deal concerning Hartwell House, a buyer who was never named. It felt like a slippery sequence of secrets that led nowhere, yet something nagged at him. One note, hastily scrawled in Edward's handwriting, seemed different. Not just a family matter, but financial. It mentioned debts owed to someone named H. Granger. A loud thud echoed from the first room, jolting them back to the present. "Edward," Margaret exclaimed as she instinctively moved closer to Father Brown, the tension palpable in the air. The sound of footsteps echoed, and they both turned to the still open door. Heartbeats quickening. A figure loomed in the threshold. Edward. eyes wild and unchecked. "What are you doing here?" he barked, anger spiraling into confusion. He glanced between his sister and the scattered papers on the desk, a malevolent realization dawning. "You should not have found this." "Found what, Edward?" Father Brown's voice cut through the charged atmosphere. "A trail of greed that appears to run deeper than family." Edward took a step forward, tension radiating from him as if ready to spring. "Stay out of this, Father Brown. This is family business." Yet a murder has been committed, and family business often lies at the heart of such case, Father Brown replied coolly, pressing forward with calm authority. "What did your father know about H. Granger, Edward? And what lengths would you go to for what you deem your inheritance?" Before Edward could respond, the distant chime of the church bell resonated through the manor, highlighting the precarious moment. The faint but unmistakable sound of approaching footsteps echoed from behind them. A sudden vulnerability hung in the air, uncertainty threatening to pull them under. "Run, Margaret," Father Brown shouted, shoving her behind him. "We're not safe here." But the rest of his warning was swallowed by a bone-chilling scream resounding from the manor's depths. The ominous whir of unfolding secrets echoed all around them as they braced for the revelations yet to come, truths that would either avenge an innocent soul lost or chain them irrevocably to the dark legacy of Hartwell House. The hidden room had unveiled more than they ever expected, yet the greatest mysteries still lingered, waiting for the light of day. Chapter 9. The trap set at twilight. The air was thick with the damp of impending twilight as Father Brown ambled through the cobblestone streets of Kembleford, the fading light casting elongated shadows behind him. The village, often serene, now hummed with a peculiar anticipation, as if the very stones were holding their breath. He felt it in his bones, the unease, the whispers among the townsfolk. The chestnut trees lining the road groaned in the gusty breeze, echoing the tension of the recent events. Father Brown had barely returned from his parish duties when an urgent knock echoed through the rectory. He found Mrs. McCarthy, pale and trembling, a letter clutched in her quaking hands. "Father, you must read this," she urged, pressing the parchment against his chest. The familiar scent of lavender and old paper wafted around him as he tore it open. "Dearest Margaret," he read aloud, "if you wish to save your brother from the gallows, meet me at the old chapel at dusk. Come alone." Margaret, Mrs. McCarthy's daughter, had become embroiled in the affairs of the late Lord Hargrove, whose recent death had sparked a cascade of suspicion and intrigue in their tight-knit community. The letter bore no signature, but the implication was clear. Someone believed Margaret's brother, Samuel, was guilty of murder, a charge that had torn the family apart. "Shall we alert the constable?" Mrs. McCarthy stammered, her voice laced with fear. "No," Father Brown replied thoughtfully, his mind racing. "If this is a trap, we must discover who is pulling the strings before alerting the authorities. A confrontation may provoke more danger." At the appointed hour, the sun dipped behind the peaks of the distant hills, painting the sky with streaks of crimson and indigo. Father Brown made his way to the decrepit chapel, its stones worn with the weight of countless tales of love and loss. Approaching its entrance, he paused, alert. The air was electric, charged with a spectre of uncertainty. All was still until he sensed a movement, a figure cloaked in wool, darting between the shadows, retreating into the dense undergrowth of twisted brambles. "Margaret," he called, but met only silence. He peered into the gloom, noting the intricate relief of faded saints emblazoned above the chapel door. Entering, Father Brown allowed his eyes to adjust to the dim light filtering through stained glass, illuminating the dust motes that danced like echoes of the past. From the corner of the chapel, a soft sobbing drew his attention. He approached carefully, heart racing. There sat Margaret, her hands clasped tightly around an old locket. "Father," she sobbed, "I received a note too. It was from my brother. He said he would be here. But—" "I know," Father Brown said gently. "There's an air of deception in the village, and I suspect that it runs deeper than mere sibling feuds. Samuel has hidden truths, and we must unearth them." Just then, the chapel door creaked open again, filling the space with an unwelcome, frigid draught. Father Brown turned, his heart racing anew. In stepped Dr. Vernon, the village physician, his expression unreadable. "I came searching for you, Father," he said, glancing at Margaret. "We may be running out of time. Words have reached me. There are those who would see Samuel convicted without remorse." The tension in the air thickened. "We cannot let emotions cloud our judgment," Father Brown said, studying Dr. Vernon carefully. "Why do you care so much for this case, I wonder?" Vernon shifted uneasily. "As a physician, I care for lives. Samuel may not be innocent, but neither should he be sacrificed. Perhaps this whole affair is to conceal deeper sins." Father Brown directed his gaze to Margaret, whose eyes now brimmed with suspicion. "You trust him?" she asked uncertainly. "I trust actions more than words," Father Brown replied, kneeling beside her as the evening air grew ominous. "He may be hiding something." "Was it not you who said our greatest sins often mask our most profound motivations?" Vernon interjected. Father Brown's expression darkened. "Precisely. But we must separate intention from action, lest we chase phantoms into the night." As the last of the suns slipped beneath the horizon, the chapel enveloped them in shadows, bringing an unsettling chill. Suddenly, another letter fluttered down from above, landing at Father Brown's feet. He picked it up, recognizing the handwriting immediately. The contents sent a shiver down his spine. "To whom it may concern, it was not Samuel. I know who truly committed the crime, and tonight it shall be revealed." "What is it, Father?" Margaret asked, leaning closer. "Get your brother and bring him here," Father Brown ordered, feeling the urgency thrum in his veins. Time is of the essence. As if summoned by the very urgency of his words, a rustling in the bushes caught their attention. Both men turned to see a shadowy figure lurching into the clearing. Samuel McCarthy. His expression was wild, distressed. "You must stop them," he gasped, eyes wide with terror. "Stop who?" Father Brown queried, but Samuel was already falling to his knees, clutching his head as if the very weight of truth was too heavy to bear. "It's not safe," he murmured. "The real killer, he's coming for us." Just as Father Brown stepped forward to reassure the trembling youth, the wind howled through the broken windows of the chapel, a harbinger of approaching chaos. The very shadows that buoyed. The candles flickered ominously. Outside, the furious crack of thunder echoed, rattle, silencing the hushed village. And within that tempest, as Brother Brown prepared to unravel the real story, something unexpected loomed in the mist, a figure cloaked in dark intentions, wielding the secrets of the past. The trap was set, and twilight would not yield easily to the dawn. As the doors to the chapel swung ominously open, the unseen menace was revealed. Whoever held the reins of this unfolding Tragedy would stop at nothing to ensure their secrets remained buried, and Father Brown suddenly found himself at the heart of a darkness deeper than he had anticipated. Would they be the next victims in this deadly game of chess? The voice that whispered through the storm struck dread into his heart, a singular truth about to make itself known, as the night grounded to a tremulous hold. Chapter 10. The Ripple Effect of Fear. The morning mist clung like a ghost to the cobblestones of Kembleford, winding its way through the narrow lanes and wrapping the village in a shroud of uncertainty. Father Brown strolled slowly, the congregation of St. Mary's still fresh in his thoughts as he made his way past the ancient churchyard, where the gravestones stood vigil against the creeping fog. Today, however, there was a foreboding in the air that sent shivers down his spine, an instinct awoken by the chilling scream that sliced through the stillness. Rushing towards the sound, Father Brown pushed through the wrought-iron gate to the garden of Alderman Felix Nightingale, where he found the ministering figure of Miss Orlane, the village matron, kneeling beside a body sprawled on the damp grass. Gasping for breath, she looked up at him, her eyes wide with horror and disbelief. "It's Mrs. Carrington, Father," she gasped, motioning toward the motionless figure that lay with hands outstretched, as if in vain protest against some unseen assailant. The woman's pristine dress was now stained, not just with the wet earth, but with the telltale markings of a struggle. "Fetch the constable, Miss Orlane," Father Brown instructed, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. The Carringtons were among the oldest families in Kembleford, and this gruesome scene could shatter the village's fragile peace. As she hurried away to summon the authorities, Father Brown knelt beside Mrs. Carrington. For a moment, he took in the lines of her face, soft and serene, as if she'd simply fallen asleep in the embrace of the morning. But as he examined the delicate clasp of her necklace, he noticed that one half of the clasp had been torn away, leaving the necklace dangling from her neck in a manner reminiscent of a noose. Anger surged within him at the thought of such violence, but he pushed it aside, focusing instead on the matter at hand. Why would anyone wish to harm her? He pondered out loud, his mind working through the possibilities. She was well liked, though perhaps pressured by the growing tension surrounding Kembleford's recent string of unsettling events, the theft of town funds, rumors of infidelity among the elite, and now murder lurking in the shadows. Pushing aside thoughts of narrow-minded gossip, Father Brown searched the vicinity. In the corner of the garden, half hidden in the hedges, gleamed a small copper locket. He carefully retrieved it, turning it over in his palm. The initials engraved on its surface, J.H., were familiar. Judith Harrow, Mrs. Carrington's estranged niece, had recently returned to Kembleford under dubious circumstances. Could this trinket offer a lead? But before he could ruminate further, the somber figure of Constable Perkins appeared, red-faced from exertion. "What is it, Father?" "Murder, it appears," Father Brown replied, maintaining his calm demeanor. "Mrs. Carrington lies dead in her garden. You may wish to summon the doctor and, of course, inform the mayor." As the constable hastened to comply, the chatter of nearby villagers grew louder, a wave of fear rippling through them as they caught sight of the unfolding tragedy. Father Brown knew well how fear could warp a community, twisting good minds into fertile grounds for suspicion. He felt it already accumulating, daring to cast its first stones upon those the villagers believed to be guilty. "Father," called a voice from beside him. It was Sarah Moffat, the baker's daughter, who had been drawn out of curiosity. "Do you believe it was the same person who started the rumors about the Carringtons?" "Rumors?" Father Brown asked, his brow furrowing as he absorbed the implications. Sarah bobbed her head, her auburn curls bouncing with the urgency of her tale. "They say Mrs. Carrington sheltered some scandalous secrets, Father, one that could ruin her family's name forever. Surely someone who desires power," Father Brown interjected, piecing the narrative together. "Which leads us right back to Judith Harrow." "Judith," Sarah echoed, fear creeping into her voice. "But she's family." "Sometimes family can become our greatest adversaries." He moved away from the corpse, feeling the weight of his deductions hinge on a delicate balance, like glass about to shatter. Suddenly, he heard rushing footsteps behind him. Turning, he found himself facing Judith Harrow, her face pale and stark against the vivid green of the garden. She gasped at the sight of her aunt's body collapsing against the hedge for support. "What happened? Who did this?" "Understandably, you're distraught, Miss Harrow," Father Brown said gently, observing the way she struggled to maintain her composure. "But I must ask, where were you when your aunt met her fate?" "Father, I swear I was—" she stammered. Her eyes darted to the locket in Father Brown's hand, and for a brief moment, something shifted behind her gaze. "That is mine. I lost it." "Some would argue you lost more than a trinket." The accusation slipped from Father Brown's lips before he could recant. "For heaven's sake," Judith wailed, her voice rising in indignation. "What do you think I am? A murderer?" Father Brown's heart sank a little further. He had drawn his deduction in haste, perhaps fearing the ripple effects of fear he so often cautioned against. But he knew this moment was only the beginning. The village's dark underbelly had risen to the surface, and the next twist could bring even more peril to light. As Judith crumpled to the ground, a sudden rustle in the bushes piqued his attention. Father Brown turned, his stomach knotting as he saw someone slip away into the fog, a fleeting shadow, all too aware of the dreadful chess game unfolding. The mystery was deepening, like the mist that enveloped Kembleford, and in that fleeting moment he sensed they were all players, bound by fear's unyielding hand. With the sound of distant sirens growing louder, Father Brown knelt beside Mrs. Carrington once more, resolved to uncover the truth buried beneath layers of deception and dread. But as he did, a creeping notion rooted itself in his mind. How easily the next act of violence might unfold, and the dire price of this insatiable ripple of fear. Chapter 11. The Final Clue in Plain Sight. The morning fog hung like a heavy curtain over the village of Kembleford, shrouding its cobbled streets and creaky manors in an eerie silence. Father Brown stood at the edge of the churchyard, the monstrous stone church looming over him like a guardian of secrets. It was on this damp morning that he felt the weight of something pivotal pressing down upon him. The last pieces of a sordid puzzle scattered across a tapestry of treachery that had cost 2 lives. Just as he contemplated his next move, a piercing scream shattered the oppressive quiet. It echoed between the gravestones, sending a chill through Father Brown as he sprinted towards the source. The crowd gathered by the old oak, the one that had been the scene of the last mysterious tragedy. Squinting through the mist, Father Brown caught sight of Amelia Penrose, the village seamstress, as she stumbled backwards, her hands clutching her throat. Shallow breaths escaped her lips, and her eyes were wide with horror. "What is it, Amelie?" Father Brown called, quickly reaching her side. "Father, it's Reginald," she managed to stammer, pointing a trembling finger towards a cluster of onlookers who had gathered at the edge of the graveside. In the chapel, Reginald Tutcombe was known well in Kembleford, a local scholar with a penchant for antiquities and a bit too much fondness for the bottle. He had been one of the few voices raised against the recent spate of violence in the village, openly discontent with the new owners of the manor. With dread pooling in his stomach, Father Brown pushed through the onlookers to find the chapel doors ajar. The musty air was oppressive as he stepped inside and was greeted by a shocking sight. Reginald lay sprawled on the chapel floor amidst a chaotic array of fallen books, his glasses shattered nearby. The once watchful scholar would look no more upon the secrets of the past or the malfeasance that had plagued Kembleford. "Stabbed," whispered a voice behind him. It was Constable Miles, breathless and pale, just like Lady Pembroke. Father Brown nodded gravely, his mind racing. Reginald had been an unlikely target, or so it seemed. A nosy drunkard, perhaps, but not a villain. Yet the pattern was undeniable. 2 murders aligned with each other like bittersweet notes of a sordid symphony. Father Brown knelt beside Reginald, observing the area as he searched for any glimmer of meaning among the chaos. With careful precision, he turned Reginald's lifeless hand over. There, nestled in his palm, was a scrap of parchment, a hastily scrawled note that read, "Bury secrets in the open." Father Brown's heart skipped a beat. It suggested not just a hidden clue, but a deliberate placement, an invitation to anyone who could decipher its meaning. Yet what treasures or treachery lay concealed? Was there a quarrel between Reginald and anyone last night? Father Brown asked, turning to Miles, who furrowed his brow. "Not that I recall. At least, nothing that would lead to this." "How peculiar." Father Brown tucked the parchment into his coat pocket and rose, determination tightening his features. He contemplated Reginald's last moments. The scholar had been digging into the village's archives lately, searching through the dust-laden tomes for information on the old manor and its new inhabitants, the Chillington family who had arrived just weeks before the first murder. Exactly what was he searching for? Father Brown murmured to himself, feeling a heavy gaze fixed upon him. He turned to find Amelia standing silently at the doorway, her posture betraying her nervousness. "What did you see, Amelia?" Father Brown prompted gently. I was sewing in the chapel. I thought I heard voices." Her eyes softened, revealing fear more profound than merely her craft being interrupted. "Reginald was speaking with someone. I thought it was Mr. Chillington, but he was different." "Different?" Father Brown's mind raced with the implications. "He seemed under duress. I tried to listen closer, and then I saw shadow, the ermine from the manor. It dashed out from behind the pews, and then the noise stopped." "Shadow?" "Yes, the creature always seemed connected to something, though no one knows what." Father Brown considered her words, piecing together the tangled web of motives: jealousy from neighbors, secrets buried deeply in the manor, and now an animal with possible ties to Reginald's murder. "I believe Shadow is our lead," he concluded. "But how can an animal be a witness?" she protested. Father Brown turned to face her directly. "You underestimate the ordinary things around us, Amelia. A witness may not speak with words, but with presence, and the true meanings hide in plain sight." As he prepared to delve deeper into the mysteries of the manor and Shadow, a shattering realization struck him. The world of mansions and manor houses was fraught with old family feuds, bitterness, and buried secrets. The final connection lingered like cobwebs in the corners of his mind. Just then, a soft, scratching sound echoed from a nearby window, drawing their attention. Looking over, Father Brown caught sight of a small, white ermine peering in, its eyes gleaming with intelligence. The creature belonged to Mr. Chillington, but as it blinked up at him, another flutter of parchment slipped from its mouth, landing softly on the ground. "That," Father Brown muttered, "is the final clue." He rushed forward, heart racing, kneeling to retrieve the parchment that could change everything. But why did he feel as if an unseen hand was guiding the evening's dreadful events to a fateful crescendo he'd yet to fully comprehend? The mystery of Kembleford swirled within him as the fog thickened outside, swallowing the village whole, and he realized as he stood, blood pounding in his ears, that they were not alone. There were eyes watching from the shadows, waiting for the final act. Chapter 12. Justice served at last. The chill of early morning wrapped around Kembleford like a damp woolen blanket as Father Brown stepped into the still, sombre courtyard of St. Mary's Church. A thick fog clung to the stone gargoyles, framing the entrance like a spectral curtain. He could almost feel the weight of the village's secrets pressing upon him, the very air thick with anticipation, as if the day held revelations that were long overdue. The priest was hardly surprised when Lady Agnes Pembroke, the local aristocrat, materialized before him, her elegant form stark against the backdrop of creeping mist. "Father," she gasped, her cheeks pale in the pallor of dawn, "you must come quickly. It's Lady Margaret. She is dead." Lady Margaret, known for her fiery temper and a penchant for scandal, had recently been embroiled in a bitter feud with her cousin, Sir Charles, over an inheritance dispute. Father Brown felt a rush of memories. Only yesterday they had shared a cup of tea at the manor, Lady Margaret regaling him with tales of their family's past, stories forever shadowed by jealousy and greed. Together, they rushed to Pembroke Manor, its towering silhouette eerily majestic against the grey sky. The grand doors creaked open as they arrived, revealing the disarray of broken china and scattered furniture, as though a storm had swept through the house. Lady Agnes led Father Brown to the drawing room, where they found Lady Margaret sprawled on the ornate carpet, dark crimson pooled around her, stark against the brilliant colors of the tapestry. Father Brown's heart sank. He knelt beside the body, the sickly sweet scent of iron filling his nostrils. A quick glance at her lifeless form revealed no signs of struggle, but the sharp-edged dagger, a family heirloom, protruded grotesquely from her chest. "Who could have—" Lady Agnes began, her voice trailing off as she turned pale, clutching her pearls as if they could protect her. "Ah, but that is the question, isn't it?" Father Brown murmured, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the room. "A crime of passion, perhaps, but also a crime of opportunity. Who could enter and strike without a sound?" Just then, the butler, stoic and pallid, entered the room. "I found her like this when I brought in the afternoon tea, my lady." He bowed his head slightly, and for a moment, Father Brown caught a glimpse of fear dart across his eyes. "Did you notice anyone in the vicinity before this ghastly discovery?" "Hastings?" Father Brown asked, his voice calm amidst the turbulence of emotions swirling around them. "Only Sir Charles," Hastings replied cautiously. "He left a while ago, claiming he had urgent business elsewhere." "Urgent business? Or a hurried escape?" Father Brown mused. "Sir Charles has ample motive, I should think, but would he be fool enough to return to the scene of the crime?" As they discussed, Lady Agnes wrung her hands, her gaze shifting frequently towards the window as the fog thickened outside. He wouldn't dare. Not with all of his debts. He would lose everything, and the estate would default to Lady Margaret. Indeed, Father Brown replied, mentally connecting the clues. The manor's fortunes were on the line, and that could spur one into impulsive action. He turned to Hastings, realizing something. Where is Lady Margaret's diary? I believe she kept it in her writing desk, sir, Hastings stammered, his discomfort palpable. Shall we have a look? Father Brown suggested, as he glanced at Lady Agnes, who nodded, her resolve bolstered by the opportunity to uncover more. They searched the room, overturning papers and peeking into drawers. Finally, he found it, a worn, leather-bound diary stained with a mixture of ink and something darker. As he flipped through the pages, snippets of details fell into place. Her opinions on Sir Charles's financial struggles, angry jottings about a betrayal which hinted at a romantic entanglement gone sour. Then they heard footsteps approaching. Father Brown turned, just as Sir Charles entered the drawing room, his expression a portrait of feigned shock. "What happened here?" he asked, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "We were hoping you might enlighten us, Sir Charles," Father Brown replied, keeping his tone steady. "You had urgent business, did you not?" "Urgent business. I left before luncheon, hardly an hour past. I had no idea." The urgency of Sir Charles's words fell flat against Father Brown's scrutiny. "True, but you did return rather expediently, perhaps to collect something of value, or perhaps something did not sit right with you regarding your cousin, something she may have written." Before Sir Charles could reply, Lady Agnes exclaimed, "Look at her right hand." Father Brown followed her gaze, his eyes widening, as he noticed Lady Margaret's clenched fist, tight around a small scrap of paper. Carefully, he pried it loose and read the hastily scrawled note, "The truth will out, and more." "What does this mean?" Lady Agnes gasped, her face a mixture of dread and curious resolve. "I do not know yet," Father Brown replied, his mind racing. "But it seems she was onto something powerful enough to result in her death." The tension buzzed in the air, a tight wire that could snap at any moment. The implications twisted grotesquely. Jealousy, betrayal, inheritance, all were threads that could weave a shroud of deception over them all. Just then, from the depths of the fog outside came a shriek, a piercing cry that sent shivers down their spines. The sound echoed through the manor's corridors, ricocheting off the walls like a haunting reminder of the ghosts that loomed in their lives. With urgency, Father Brown grasped Lady Agnes's elbow, leading her back toward the door. "We must find out who else was entangled in this web before more lives are lost," he declared, a sense of urgency driving him. The world outside waited, and a darker truth wanted to be unearthed. As they emerged into the thick mist, the air crackled with uncertainty. Father Brown's mind raced with possibilities, and the shadows deepened about them, hiding secrets that were too dark to yet comprehend. One thing was for certain. Before the day was done, justice would not just be sought, it would be served, and it was only a matter of time before the next layer of the mystery unraveled. The game was afoot, and Father Brown was determined to see it through. The fog rolled ominously around them, and with it, waiting in the shadows, lay unknown dangers as the clergy set forth into the uncertain early light.